These days, traditional international relations, or IR theory, doesn't seem to offer much to students, scholars, or analysts trying to make sense of what's actually happening in the world. The events of the past 10 years, along with the current state of global affairs, have pushed way beyond the old-school framework that once explained how nations interact. Sure, political leaders still lean on bits and pieces of traditional IR when they talk about national or global security, but the actions that follow often look very different. Instead of staying true to those older theories, today's policies tend to focus on expanding power and influence, whether through economic pressure, corporate reach, or military strength. This episode takes a closer look at how traditional IR theory struggles to keep up with the world we're living in now, and it uses real-world examples to show just how far the gap has grown between old ideas and modern-day strategies. Welcome back to the Diplomacy and Discourse channel. I'm your host AR, and today we're diving deep into the evolving world of international relations in episode 14. As global conflicts shift, alliances like NATO expand, and humanitarian crises become more complex, we have to ask, are the traditional theories of IR, like realism and liberalism, still helping us understand the world? Or are we in need of a new framework altogether? From Machiavelli's cunning to COVID-19's chaos, this episode explores how historic theories are being tested in real time, and how new paradigms like constructivism, critical theory, and postcolonialism are pushing the boundaries of how we think about diplomacy, sovereignty, and power. Let's break it all down, past, present, and what lies ahead. Even though the major conflicts of the 20th century helped shape our understanding of international relations and global institutions, the past few years have introduced challenges that those older frameworks just aren't built to handle. The world has changed fast, and with it, the way we view and use IR theory. Today, big corporations and military powers seem more focused on using force and securing strategic advantages than on engaging with traditional academic theories. As a result, many students, scholars, and analysts find that the classic ideas of IR no longer offer clear answers to today's complex global problems. From shifting alliances to the breakdown of long-standing treaties, recent events have exposed how outdated some of our core assumptions about global politics really are. Now we're going to dive into that mismatch, showing how traditional IR theory often falls short when applied to modern realities, and using real-world examples to highlight just how much the field needs to evolve. This raises some big questions within academic circles. Are traditional IR theories still useful when the behavior of states, and even the conflicts between close allies, seem to completely ignore the foundations and institutions that once anchored international affairs? What are we actually teaching our students? What kind of sources and references are we relying on to support these theories? And how do we even evaluate them? Are we judging their value based on academic tradition? Or are we using real-world analysis that reflects today's realities? These questions point to a deeper issue: whether the discipline is adapting fast enough to keep up with a world that's clearly moving on. IR theory gives us the foundation to understand how the world works. They help us get into the minds of nations and their leaders, offering a range of perspectives that make sense of global events, political decisions, and diplomatic moves. These theories don't just explain things. They also spark important questions and debates about both current issues and moments from the past. For many students and scholars, what draws them in is the chance to dig into real-world case studies. The big, often messy, global events that first sparked their interest in international relations. IR theory helps make sense of those events, acting as both a guide and a launchpad for deeper exploration. In his influential work, Towards a Global International Relations, Amitav Akira 2017, argues that the field of international relations is gaining prominence on a global scale. He highlights how IR classrooms in Western academic institutions are increasingly filled with students from diverse cultures and regional backgrounds. While this diversity brings a range of valuable perspectives, it can also create gaps in understanding. According to Akhaira, students often carry worldviews shaped by their native, local, or continental experiences, which may not always align with or fully capture the complexities of global events and conflicts. As a result, their interpretations can sometimes fall short in explaining international dynamics with the nuance those issues demand. One of the foundational pillars of international relations theory is realism. At its core, realism focuses on competition, conflict, and the constant struggle for power. It sees the world as a place where disputes and rivalries are not just possible, but inevitable. Realist thinkers often turn to history for their case studies, believing that the patterns of the past will repeat themselves, because human nature doesn't really change. In this view, ego tends to outweigh altruism, and mistrust between states is the default. War, rather than peace, is seen as the norm. To underscore this perspective, realists often point out that in the last 3,000 years of recorded history, only about 300 years have been free of war between nations, a sobering statistic that reflects their belief in the perspective of conflict as a defining feature of international relations. Niccolò Machiavelli strongly aligned with this realist perspective, arguing that human nature often undermines safety, stability, and even the survival of the state. During the 15th and early 16th centuries, leaders of city-states, often powerful patriarchs, played a dominant role in shaping political affairs. In his famous work, The Prince, 1532, Machiavelli laid out his vision of leadership rooted in pragmatism and power. He argued that a ruler's top priority should be the security of the state, even if it meant resorting to manipulation, force, or deception. For Machiavelli, the ends justified the means. He championed a kind of personal responsibility that prioritized political survival and strategic gain over moral or societal norms. In essence, leaders should be willing to do whatever it takes, even if it's ruthless or morally questionable, to achieve and protect their goals. Now let's shift to liberalism, one of the most dominant and widely discussed schools of thought in modern international relations. You'll often hear the term liberal democracy tossed around in political debates, academic discussions, and media analysis. It's a relatively modern concept, shaped largely by the events of the 20th century and rooted in the idea of promoting democratic governance, free and fair elections, individual rights, rule of law, and constitutional order. In many ways, liberalism stands in direct contrast to realism. While realism sees conflict and power struggles as inevitable, liberalism offers a more hopeful, even idealistic, view of world politics. It assumes that cooperation, mutual respect, and the protection of civil liberties can overcome humanity's darker instincts, like the hunger for dominance, territorial expansion, and war. The third major theory in international relations is constructivism, which gained momentum in the early 1990s, especially after the limitations of realism and liberalism became more apparent. While those earlier theories emphasized power struggles, self-interest, and institutional imbalances, constructivism took a different path. It emerged in response to transformative global events like the end of the Cold War, the fall of the Berlin Wall, and the collapse of communism, none of which were sparked by formal state initiatives. Instead, these changes were driven by people, ordinary citizens who rejected authoritarian regimes and demanded something new. As Nicholas Onuf explains in World of Our Making, 2012, constructivism sees the world as shaped by society itself, not just by governments, elites, or international bodies. According to this view, it's people, whether they're heads of state, activists, or everyday citizens, who influence policies, inspire change, and reshape the course of international relations. Another important perspective in international relations is critical theory. As the name implies, this approach challenges the core ideas behind modern systems of governance, economics, taxation, and trade, arguing that many of these structures actually contribute to the oppression and control of everyday people. At its heart, critical theory seeks to expose these power imbalances and offer a path toward emancipation, civil liberties, and true freedom. Though widely applied today, its roots go back centuries to the ideas of philosophers like Karl Marx and Immanuel Kant. Both thinkers were central to the Enlightenment, promoting the concept of universalism, an early form of what we might now call globalism. This vision imagines a world of shared ideas, peaceful cooperation, and inclusive governance, where diverse societies can coexist and thrive together under common principles of justice and equality. While idealistic, critical theory provides a powerful lens through which to question existing systems and imagine a more just global order. Postcolonial theory is another key approach in international relations, emerging in the 20th century as the great empires of the world began to fall apart. The collapse of colonial rule, accelerated by 2 world wars and growing national resistance, left behind a global landscape shaped by the aftermath of empire. In this new reality, powerful nations, especially the United States, stepped into leadership roles, often reshaping international systems to reflect their own interests and values. Postcolonial theory challenges this shift by analyzing global events through the eyes of formerly colonized and less powerful states. It focuses on the long-term effects of imperialism, raising critical questions about sovereignty, national identity, the abuse of human rights, and the marginalization of certain nations in global politics. At its core, postcolonial theory urges scholars and policymakers to reconsider whose voices are being heard and whose are being silenced in the story of international relations. In the 21st century, international relations theory has continued to evolve, sometimes in ways that make the older, classical theories feel outdated or disconnected from today's global challenges. Postmodern and cosmopolitan approaches have gained traction, often promoting idealistic visions of global peace, equality, and universal freedom. These theories don't just analyze states. They champion a world where every individual, regardless of nationality or background, has a voice and a place. As Alix Dietzel explains in Global Justice and Climate Governance, Bridging Theory and Practice, 2019, this perspective is rooted in cosmopolitanism, which shifts the focus from the power of the state to the moral responsibilities of the individual. In this view, human dignity and ethics take center stage, pushing for a more inclusive and just global society where traditional boundaries, whether cultural, political, or geographic, hold less sway over how justice is understood and pursued. This theory envisions a form of global social justice that applies to all people, regardless of their nationality, citizenship, or social status, aiming to create a truly universal and inclusive international order. World War I marked a turning point in human history, not only as the deadliest conflict the world has seen up to that point, but also as the catalyst for a new vision of global cooperation. In the wake of unimaginable destruction, there was a shared desire among world leaders to prevent such devastation from ever happening again. U.S. President Woodrow Wilson introduced his famous 14 points, a blueprint for peace that emphasized diplomacy, self-determination, and collective security. One of the most influential outcomes of this vision was the creation of the League of Nations, a precursor to what would later become the United Nations, designed to promote dialogue among nations and maintain international peace. Following the even more catastrophic Second World War, the international community took more definitive steps towards institutionalizing peace and cooperation. The founding of the United Nations, the drafting of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, the creation of the International Court of Justice, and the establishment of major alliances like NATO and the European Union reflected a shared commitment to multilateralism. The post-war era saw a surge in global governance mechanisms, international law agreements, and cooperative frameworks like the Council of Europe. Yet, despite these promising developments, conflict did not vanish. Instead, the world quickly entered the tense standoff of the Cold War, a period that deeply influenced the field of international relations, reinforcing realist theories that emphasized power politics, security dilemmas, and state interests over idealistic cooperation. The United Nations was envisioned as a global forum where nations could come together to confront common challenges, regardless of their differences, and work collaboratively towards shared solutions. NATO, on the other hand, was established to protect the freedom and security of its members through a combination of political dialogue, military readiness, and democratic values. However, the end of the Cold War brought unexpected challenges and opportunities. International institutions found themselves navigating a rapidly shifting geopolitical landscape. Powerful states, in particular, adapted quickly to this new reality, pursuing strategic objectives that included expanding their influence, reshaping foreign societies, and asserting dominance through both hard and soft power. This era gave rise to new economic initiatives, as well as global partnerships and competitive diplomacy that continue to shape international relations today. As the 20th century came to a close and the 21st began, a new set of challenges emerged on the global stage, reshaping the priorities of both nation-states and international institutions. However, these two forces often found themselves at odds, particularly given the influence of the permanent 5 members of the UN Security Council. Crises like the Rwandan genocide, the wars in Bosnia and Kosovo, and later the COVID-19 pandemic exposed major flaws in the effectiveness of global institutions. These events revealed a hard truth. Despite decades of international cooperation and the theoretical framework of IR, states still act according to their own interests, and those national agendas often override international commitments. Scholars like Peter Kratenstein, Robert Kehonen, and Stephen Krasner argue that such dynamics reflect deeper patterns of strategic behavior. In their 1999 work, International Organization and the Study of World Politics, they emphasized how agenda setting, uncertainty, and strategic manipulation continue to shape global politics, even within liberal institutional frameworks. In recent years, we've seen growing confusion and division surrounding the relevance and application of international relations theories, particularly when it comes to controversial global events. One notable example was the 1999 Kosovo crisis, which coincided with NATO's 50th anniversary. Instead of presenting a moment of unity, the crisis exposed deep fractures within the alliance. On March 23, 1999, NATO launched an air campaign against Belgrade, aiming to stop the ethnic cleansing of the Kosovar Albanian population. While many justified the intervention as a moral and humanitarian act, The operation sparked intense debate among member states and international observers, especially due to the lack of a formal UN Security Council resolution authorizing the use of force. As J.J. Holst noted in Keeping a Fractured Peace, 1994, such interventions highlight the ongoing tension between the principles of sovereignty and the right to intervene. Supporters of the NATO action maintained it was a necessary and humane response to atrocities. However, critics like Adam Roberts, in his 1999 article, NATO's Humanitarian War over Kosovo, argued that without proper UN approval, the operation challenged international legal norms, raising questions about the legitimacy of so-called humanitarian wars. When it comes to the ongoing integration of aspiring countries into NATO, several key factors must be taken into account, most notably security, democratic governance, political stability, and adherence to the rule of law. As a geopolitical alliance, NATO is not just a military pact. It's also rooted in the promotion of democratic values. Upholding these principles is essential, not only for the internal stability of new member states, but also for the broader security of the region and the international community. Failing to do so can open the door to a host of challenges, including political instability, organized crime, corruption, and trafficking, all of which can undermine collective security. These concerns continue to spark debate and reveal the limitations of traditional IR theories, which often struggle to address the complex interplay between normative values and strategic interests in today's international landscape. NATO member states must be seen as strategic assets, not liabilities. Membership should not simply serve as an extension of a modern-day containment policy reminiscent of George F. Kennan's Cold War doctrine, now repurposed for today's greater power rivalries or the ongoing war in Ukraine. Rather, NATO allies must embody strength, stability, and democratic integrity. They need to be vigilant, resilient, and fully prepared to face evolving global threats, including unconventional ones like pandemics. The COVID-19 crisis served as a wake-up call, revealing that security is no longer confined to traditional military threats, but extends to public health, cyber defense, and social cohesion. The pandemic exposed significant cracks in the foundation of international cooperation. Collective security institutions, including NATO, struggled to respond effectively. Instead of rallying around a unified strategy, member states turned inward, prioritizing national interests over collective responsibility. Terms like sovereignty, citizenship, and my country, my people dominated political discourse, sidelining the ideals of European solidarity and global cooperation. This shift weakened trust and undercut the vision of a shared, interconnected security community, one that transcends borders in moments of global crisis. These challenges must be addressed head-on. NATO's role now includes confronting new global threats while reinforcing its democratic foundations. The alliance must be deliberate and strategic in admitting new members, focusing on states that are politically stable, democratically robust, and ready to contribute meaningfully to collective security. As NATO Secretary General Jens Stoltenberg emphasized during the Munich Security Conference on February 18, 2022, quote, "Standing together in NATO, we will continue to keep the peace and protect our democratic way of life, as we have done for more than 70 years." End quote. His words echoed the urgency of maintaining unity through shared democratic values. These developments also force us to revisit foundational questions in the study of international relations. How should we evaluate the theories we teach? What academic sources still hold explanatory power? And should our assessments be grounded in theoretical tradition or in real-world analytical relevance? As we've explored today, the international stage is more fragmented and unpredictable than ever. And yet the desire for cooperation, peace, and shared values remains strong. Theories of international relations aren't just academic concepts. They are lenses through which we interpret war, peace, and the decisions shaping our future. From Kosovo to COVID, from realism to cosmopolitanism, the question remains: what should we teach? How do we assess? And what kind of world are we preparing the next generation to inherit? Thank you for tuning in to Diplomacy and Discourse. Don't forget to subscribe, leave a comment, and share your thoughts. You can always reach us at diplomacyanddiscourse@gmail.com. Until next time, keep questioning, keep learning, and keep engaging.